I'm an avid follower of Tony Robbins because it sort of helps my journey as a coach. And, he talks about breaking your patterns and also the ability for human beings to like switch their mindset. So to notice what's going on, switch your mindset. And of course you have to be flexible because you might slip off the G string in Lieutenant Key J, but what you're going to do, you just have to get back on the horse, so sometimes that happens,
I had a great time connecting with today's guest. What an insightful person, and such a cool person in general and a person in the music world and the bass world. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we're talking today with Tony Alcock, who is the double bass section leader for the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. And we've actually had a couple people associated with the orchestra on previously. Jeremy Watt plays in the section there. We talked to him about his very cool pandemic project and other things. Stephen Street has been I don't know if sub is the right word or extra player. I'm not sure what the terminology is exactly in the UK. But Tony is the section leader. And in addition to playing in the orchestra, he does many things, but he's been getting into coaching. So we've got his coaching site linked up. Definitely check that out as well. And he's been putting out great videos on YouTube. Check that out. That's all linked up. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's dig into this conversation with Tony Alcock.
Hey, Jason, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Good. How are you doing, Tony? Nice to see you too.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, I guess.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Where are you in the world, Jason?
I'm in San Francisco. So
wonderful.
It's nice. It says I've lost all sense of seasonality or winter or any of that stuff. It's a thing of the past out here. But I lived in a colder climate for a long time. So this is I've been out here 5 years, and you get real used to, sunshine and palm trees. At least I have.
Oh, I've had some wonderful times in San Francisco. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, have you been through there touring with the orchestra or just for fun? Or?
Yeah, I came with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool! Wow.
It was great.
Where did you play? Did you play at Davies Hall?
Davies Hall. Yeah.
Okay.
And you've got that fantastic corridor with loads of famous musicians all over the walls. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Great place.
Yeah. Well, if you visited, I don't know how much time you got to explore the city. There's this little tower. It looks like it's like this little cylinder on top of a hill. It's called Coit Tower. And I live right at the base of that. So it's a popular tourist. Yeah, it's a popular tourist destination. You might have seen the sea lions barking.
Yes, I went down there. Yeah.
Okay, I don't live right there because that would be really annoying with the sea lions, but I live like maybe 4 blocks south.
Oh, that's really cool. And you've got that windy street as well that all the tourists go to, haven't you?
Lombard Street. I used to live on that street. I didn't live on that twisty part, but I was just a bit east. But yeah, wow. Next time you're in town after the pandemic, let's meet up, and I'd love to take you out for a coffee or something like that.
Oh, that'd be great.
It'd be great. I was actually in your part of the world just over a year ago. It was my last international trip before the pandemic. I was in Leeds.
Oh, yeah.
And I was filming a course with Discover Double Bass. Jeff Chalmers is up there in Leeds. And so it was a great time. I was there for maybe 8 days, and it was the cheapest international flight I've ever gotten. It was like $600 US, and I thought, why is it so cheap? And then I thought, Leeds in January is probably not like the premier tour.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a great place, Leeds. I did a lot of work up in the north. I was in the Halle. That was one of my first jobs. So we used to go regularly to Sheffield, which is not far from Leeds, but another big city in Yorkshire.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what to expect. That was my first time to the UK, and I pictured in my mind, like old. I was thinking like Port City, which it's not, but I had that in my mind, so like what I think of Liverpool looking like back 100 years ago. But it was a great town, and I love the nightlife and I don't know what it's like right now. It's probably shut down, but it was really I had a wonderful time, and it was the next time I come to the UK, I'll do a proper trip and go to London, and it was one of those things where I had something right before and right after, and so I just didn't have enough time to.
Oh, right, okay. Well, Leeds is amazing. I don't know if you went to Leeds Town Hall.
I walked by Leeds Town Hall. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't go in,
Well,
but I did. But yeah,
inside it's got this massive like pipe organ, and if you look on top of one of the biggest pipes, like the 64-foot or whatever it's called, there's a paint pot on the top of it, painted in the same color as the rest of the pipes, and it's as if like the guy painting the organ decided, oh well, nobody will ever tell if I paint it blue, and he's just sort of left it there. It's just amazing, and you can see people looking up at the organ going, hey, is that a paint tin up there? It is. Oh, okay.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. Yeah.
I had a wonderful time. I can't wait to go back. It's funny being out here in San Francisco. It's just a long enough of a flight that it's a little bit, it's like I used to live in Chicago, which, Chicago to the UK is maybe, I don't know, 7 hours tops, something like that. But here I generally have to transfer on the East Coast of the US and fly. So that Leeds trip, I think I did San Francisco, Philadelphia, Dublin, Leeds, so it's one of those like,
long haul,
20-hour days. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
And flying with a bass to and from America must be a nightmare. I don't know if you do that at all, but
I haven't done it in a while. For my rule of thumb these days is I just never travel with a bass, but I never play anything that hard when I go somewhere. So
yeah, that's a good trick to have. Yeah.
Well, but when the orchestra travels a fair amount, your orchestra, right? I mean, obviously not 2020, 2021, but yeah. Yeah,
we traveled mostly around Europe, and we had a Salzburg festival booked with principal conductor Mirga Gražnita-Tila, which is, you have to practice that one. And but that got cancelled. So we're hoping to do it this summer. So that'll be amazing. Salzburg Festival playing Britain's War Requiem. So I'll just turn my picture around so you can see the double bass shrine. But,
I noticed that. I love it. What have you got now? Because I was reading in your bio. I think do you have a lot? Is one of those a lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
The lot's the one in the middle. That's also in the Martin's book, the English double bass. That's late period John Lott. And then behind is William Howarth of Manchester, which is a bit later. It's 1899. And then at the front is a very, very sexy Italian pear-shaped bass. It's labeled Pietro Tonomi, but I mean, who knows? I don't know. It's a great bass, and it's still got the original 3-string bridge on, and wow. It's an absolute beauty. So
is that one going to be in the Italian double bass book? I'm wondering.
I hope so. I showed it. Showed it to the Martins. I don't know whether they're going to put it in or not. So I think they were like scratching. Well, we're not sure. We're going to do a bit more research. So, but I just love it.
I was going to ask, is your lot in the English double bass book? If you probably can't see it behind me, but that English double bass book is weighing down that shelf back by my bass. It's
it's just here.
Massive. It was great when that came out. Scott Pingle, the principal bass of the San Francisco Symphony,
I know
his
Scott.
bass is in there too. Yeah, and it was funny because I saw like backstage, Scott had that book and he was like going through it like day one. So,
right. I don't know which bass that would, because when I met him, we met up with him with the RPO, and then I went out there solo a few years later, and he had a Busan bass.
You know what, Tony? Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe it's that his bass is going to be in the Italian double bass book.
I imagine
it could be that. Yeah. But Scott's a bass enthusiast regardless.
Oh yeah,
so
he's great.
That's a sort of book.
Yeah. He loves all things double bass, doesn't he? And
yeah. How did you two get connected? What did you meet?
Well, it was, when we were there with the RPO, he came out for a sort of, a post-concert drink. He came to the concert, and then he came out. He took us to a nice restaurant just sort of up the hill, which was great. There's lots of nice restaurants around there, aren't there? And we went to this nice place, and I think he was a bit shocked by how much the guys drank, so I think he was like taking, oh wow, okay. And so I went out there a few years later, so and I sort of stayed for almost a week and sort of did my own thing out there. It was good to be out there.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Mm.
Scott's awesome. He and I've known him for 20 years at this point. We did a music festival back right before he got his first professional job, and it's been great to be out here. And I play occasionally in the Symphony here, and it's a really fun time.
Wow,
It's
cool.
Yeah, and it's fun talking to the musicians who've been in that orchestra for a few decades, because that area has changed tremendously in San Francisco. There used to be a freeway that would come right down by this, and so you'd leave the hall, and it was like you were in the underpass of a freeway, and it was all sorts of sleazy stuff. And then
I can imagine.
in 1980. Oh yeah, and then in 1989 there was a big earthquake here, and it damaged that freeway, so they had to tear it down and actually turn that neighborhood around. And now it's one of the most attractive neighborhoods in town. But if you go back to, some of the bass players have been there since 1980. You talk to them about their early seasons, right when Davies was built, and it was rough, and it still gets shady as you get away from there, but that area right around the hall is really desirable.
I met a gentleman called Stephen, is it Tramontozzi, or is that how you say his name?
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Stephen Tramontozzi. Yep.
Yeah, Tramontozzi. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I met him. Yeah. And I did meet another old guy, but just briefly outside the stage door. But yeah, it was mostly Scott that I got to know.
Yeah, Scott's great. I think Scott he probably holds some kind of record as playing the most viewed bowed bass solo, because we have this new basketball arena that opened here in 2019, and the opening events weren't sports. It was the San Francisco Symphony and Metallica, and they played 2 sold out shows, and Scott played this massive double bass tribute to the original bassist, and it was just bass and then drums about 5 minutes in, and there was something like 25,000 people at its seats. So there were 2 sold out shows, and then they did a documentary including Scott, and I think it went out on Netflix. So that's been viewed like millions of times. So I don't know if there's a Guinness Book of World Records for most viewed bass solo, but that's probably up there for at least Arco bass.
It's pretty close to it. Yeah. And what was also impressive is when you walk up to the hall, certainly when I went, there was like life-size, double, triple life-size photo of Scott in his bass and people from the orchestra. So that's really great. I think it sort of helps people sort of identify, that's a guy I know, that's a girl I know, outside the hall. It was a really good thing, I thought.
Yeah, they've been great with marketing. We're doing an ad for the San Francisco Symphony here, Tony, but they'll be thrilled. But they have those banners around the city too, and it's funny. In my neighborhood, there had been one of Scott for a long time with his bass, and I just thought it was kind of funny to be walking the dog or going to the grocery store, and I look up and there's principal bass of the town I live in. It's a tricky town for classical music audiences and marketing, and I'd be curious to know what it's like in Birmingham too. But San Francisco is a little bit, it's kind of like an old world city plopped on the West Coast. Like we have the symphony and we have the opera and we have the ballet, the art, it's got all that culture, but then we have all this tech influence too. And these companies, it's a lot of young people. They don't necessarily go to the symphony. So the symphony, the institutions and then we have the pandemic. So who knows after this, but it had definitely been a struggle. What's it been like for Birmingham? I'm so ignorant of I kind of know, I've talked to people in the classical music scene in the UK a bit, but how are things in terms of audiences? And we could just sort of forget about the last year, I guess. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But
I suppose what I draw some comfort from the fact that the same story has been going since I started 35 years ago, and it's still the case that CBSO's audience is predominantly in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and the Grey Prince Brigade, and certainly from white ethnicities. We're doing all we can to sort of broaden our appeal, but it's still work in progress. We've got to sort of look at diversity and very, very seriously. I mean, it's a challenge for us, and the Arts Council, who support orchestras, have also flagged it up as something to do. So, I mean, we're starting supporting a school in Sandwell, which is an area near Birmingham, to sort of nurture and support music education. And I think that's where things will develop. Because, I think to answer your question, it's always been a challenge, but I think it's particularly challenging at the moment. I think in the sort of golden period, I suppose, in Simon Rattle's days, and continuing on through Zachary Oromo and through Andres Nelson's, audiences were at a peak. And then I think just economically, things have, got difficult, as we all know, with austerity over the last 10 years. So that's been a challenge. But Birmingham is actually very culturally diverse. It's got one of the youngest populations in Europe, and also some major projects are relocating to Birmingham. So HSBC, which is a huge bank over here, have relocated their headquarters here. And love it or loathe it, the HS2, which is a high-speed train, is also got a significant thing here. So things are happening in Birmingham, and there's great opportunities. But it is a challenge to get young people to connect with music. We play to a lot of schools, and there's an important age group called Key Stage 2 or Key Stage 3, where we play to thousands and thousands of young people. But it's whether that one connection for that one concert makes an impact. I think we've really got to look at supporting the infrastructure of music, which is what CVSO is doing through its education program and community programs. But there's lots of opportunities there to reach out.
It's so hard. It's so hard to track that stuff, isn't it? Because it's the sort of thing that it's like 10 years later. Because the only reason I'm playing bass is because my local orchestra, I went to a concert and Gary Carr was the soloist.
Oh, wow.
Played a duet with the principal bass, like he did for hundreds of orchestras, if not thousands. But the only reason, and then I talk to young people, or any people really, that do go to concerts, and how often they played an instrument in high school, or what. It's just so interesting, like how people come into it. And it is funny, isn't it, that, audiences are aging out, they're graying out. Well, they've been the same age for 30 years or 50 years.
Yeah.
And so that obviously can't be true. It wasn't a bunch of 20-year-olds going, 50 years ago but it's just interesting that, so HSBC Bank, they're all over here in San Francisco. That's cool that's in Birmingham. Yeah. And the young, I was struck by Leeds, actually. I don't know how similar or different the two cities are, but how many young people and young professionals there were in that town or are in that town. And they have a big tech sector there in Leeds. It sounds like it's a big entrepreneurial hub. So it's interesting. I was picturing Port Town, which is totally wrong, but it's that you got a young population there, and that it's tricky to figure out how to reach those folks.
In Britain, there were sort of music was a working class thing also, through bands, colliery bands, mining bands, through institutions like Salvation Army, who had their own bands. So that was a big tradition. Choirs were a big tradition. And then certainly when I was at school in the 70s and the 80s, there was free music provision. That was, it meant that, economics weren't in play. People from all backgrounds could experience music. I think that's a really important thing. And that's a challenge now. And so few people get, lessons or exposure to that. So I think that's one of the biggest things. But like you, I wouldn't be a bass player unless there'd been that grassroots support. And I remember going to see Gary Carr. I think the first time I saw him live, I was already in the Halle Orchestra. And I lived in this little place outside Manchester, or quite little, called Stockport. It's a satellite of Manchester. And I just happened to know, I went past this sign, it's pre-internet, and it said, Gary Carr, Stockport Sunday School. Literally, a Sunday school next to a church. And I went along there on a Wednesday evening, and there was Gary Carr. And he was just a fantastic entertainer, but he really did sort of some small venues as well as the big ones. So it's just putting in those hours and that. But the undeniable thing is the passion for the instrument, isn't it? I think, and that's the thing that's I've had in common with all my teachers, and sort of my own enthusiasm for the bass is sort of you've got to be undaunted by what people throw at you, and you just got to. That is the main thing for me. The fact that I love the sound of the bass, and I love the versatility of it.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, and one of the things that struck me about Dorico when I first opened it up was this innovative user interface design. There are 5 different modes. There is setup, write, engrave, play, and print mode. And here is Senior Product Manager Daniel Spreadbury on why they set it up like this.
As they are presented to you on the screen, they're kind of there in a strip at the top left-hand corner of the screen, and they're very prominent. You can whack them with your mouse, or if you're using a Surface, you can tap them with your finger, and that basically then changes the whole UI of the program.
It is such an innovative design. It makes working for me so much cleaner in music notation software. I have become such a fan. I use this piece of software every single day. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their page on Steinberg's website. And there's a free version, Dorico SE, that'll let you do practically everything the program does with up to 2 parts. So that's perfect if you're working with a student or making exercises or that kind of thing. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make hand-built mics out of Portland, Oregon, and they have an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. The Nadine is a condenser mic with a clear, natural sound and incredible feedback rejection. This mic is a completely new design. The head mounts in between the strings above the tailpiece with a rubber grommet, and the body securely straps to the tailpiece with Velcro elastic. A 14-inch Mogami cable connects the 2 parts, making it easy to place on any bass. It's durable and holds up to the demanding needs of the instrument while offering excellent sound quality. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt just for Contrabass Conversations listeners with the purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out the Nadine. Yeah, it's that Gary. I don't know if you've ever read Life on the G String, Gary Carr's biography, I guess. Mary Ranney is the author on that, and I actually had her on I haven't put up the episode yet, but I talked to her for the podcast, and I was reading that book maybe 3 months ago, and it just struck me. I knew Gary's backstory, but I was just thinking, like, wow, what a pioneer this guy was. Like, it still feels a bit odd to have a solo bass on a concert, the Alex Hanna, the principal of bass of the Chicago Symphony, he played Von Hall a few years ago, and that was like, whoa, it's every decade we get a solo bass. But I just think about, pre-internet, thinking about like in the 70s or whatever, Gary Carr, like just talk about blazing territory and just like the resistance, that he faced doing it. It just made me admire him all the more, kind of reading that and thinking about, playing all these small venues and just all the crazy twists and turns of his career.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, as you said, like resistance, but also the other R word is like resilience, being able to believe that you've still got something that is worth hearing. And, unless you believe that, nobody else will. But he was definitely the first solo bass player I heard. And when you consider what else was going on, really at the forefront of. And also the interesting thing is that he made it fun, and he also made it accessible. There was always the element that, this was this cheeky guy who was actually having fun, making something look really difficult, but actually, making it look really easy, but actually it was really difficult. And it's
Yeah, and I think people misunderstand that a little bit. They think, oh, he's making the bass look like a ridiculous instrument, which we're all one step away from looking ridiculous on the bass anyway. So I don't think that's the case. But I was talking to Gary about his on-stage demeanor, we can say, a few years ago. And he was telling me back early in his career, he was super serious on stage. And, if you ever go back on YouTube and find those Leonard Bernstein clips of him playing, there were no smiles in those clips. And he said, he had this, what seems like a weird turn in his career, where he decided to go be an elementary school general music teacher in Canada. It's like, all right, I played, Carnegie Hall bass, I'm all playing all over the world. I think I'm going to go teach kids general music. But he said that he started to take himself, I might be getting this a little wrong, but he started to take himself a little less seriously by working with those kids. They sort of like brought out some of that play. And after that is when you start to really see that Gary you think of on stage, kind of having fun and smiling, and all his charm that he brings to what he does.
Well, absolutely. I think one of the advantages of that, certainly in performance, is that if you focused on the other people, and a lot of people have attachment in or what are people thinking of me, or I must do this right, so they've got attachment to perfection, but actually if you've got connection to sort of like well, how can I serve those people I'm playing to? You know, what is it that they'll be interested in? And, you know, like kids don't have those filters of, oh, you know, he played the F sharp slightly sharp there or whatever. They don't have any of that. And so they're just sort of like, they're like a sponge, aren't they? Sort of soaking it up. So I can see that that's a really strong thing to do. I mean, I think sort of imagining, even in an audition, you're playing to a bunch of school kids, you know, how would they be? They'd be curious, they'd be non-judgmental, they'd be available, you know, sort of, they want to have some fun, they want to be entertained. So that was very, very perceptive. And yeah, I was talking to a conductor, Andrew Litton, a few months ago, because I sort of led some sort of conductor groups, just of conversations. And he was saying that, you know, he sort of got the impression he wasn't allowed to smile, you know, he had to be a serious musician. And then as he's got older, he sort of thought, well, you know, what is the point if I'm not having fun and expressing it? What, you know, nobody else is going to have fun. So I think, yeah, it's that same thing. You know, when you're with sort of fun and joy and creativity, there's so much less room for like your inner critic to go mad and sort of come up with complicated stories, you know, because we have great imaginations, don't we? I know I certainly do. And so if you keep it on, well, what is it I'm doing here? Why am I playing music? And just keep it then. And who am I serving? And what is it about this piece that I attach to? Then it sort of like keeps the relationship clean, you know?
Yeah, you're reminding me of I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Is it Todd Koopman, the conductor?
Okay.
I hope I'm right on that.
Yeah.
But he came and did a concert here about a year and a half ago with the San Francisco Symphony that I was playing in the bass section for, and bringing up Scott Pingle again. Scott said that he had been looking forward to that concert as one of the highlights of the season, and Todd just radiates enthusiasm and joy and smiling. He's like, I think Scott called him a happy grandpa or something like that. I mean, but it was just like one of those, and a brilliant musician, but there was just such, like, the whole orchestra was smiling that whole week. It was just like a really, he just up there, it brought, I mean, just that, it was certainly a highlight of the year for me, performance wise, but it's amazing what a difference that kind of energy can make.
Well, it is all about energy, isn't it? You know, the similarity with Gary's energy and Tom Koopman, as you mentioned, is that it's attractive, isn't it? So I remember working for a guy called Riccardo Minassi, a clarinetist. I think he's a clarinetist, and he's also a conductor. And he had people laughing, you know, not at him, but like with him. And also, I think it's about that development in conducting styles. You know, in the old days, you used to have like tyrants and the power relationships going on. And nowadays, you know, you can either have great personality like Bernstein, you know, you knew who was in the room. You can have great intellect, or you can actually, you know, you will get a different sound from an orchestra when when they're with joy and fun and lightness. For example, Mirga, our conductor, she brings great lightness and sort of like joy. And a lot of the time, all she says is like, well, can you make that sound, that chord sound more wah and wah? And sort of like, we all get that. You don't necessarily need words to do that, but like energy and things moving, I think what people really respond to.
For sure. I was talking maybe 6 months ago to this wonderful guy named Dave Krebel. He was the principal horn he was assistant principal in the Chicago Symphony under Fritz Reiner.
Wow.
So this gives you an idea of how long he'd been playing. And then was principal horn of the Detroit Symphony during the Motown era, like the late 60s, early 70s. And then was principal horn here in San Francisco for 20 years. And it was just so interesting talking to him. You know, he's one of those musicians that literally got hired by Fritz Reiner in his hotel room. You know, his teacher Philip Farkas said, "Hey, I think we're going to get you in the San Francisco, or rather the Chicago Symphony." And it was just so interesting talking to him about how just orchestra culture and hiring and everything developed. You know, from like the mid '50s to the present day, I guess. I'm sure it's been the same in the UK too, in terms of like, what's it been like for you? Or maybe I'll actually ask a question. What has it been like over your time playing professionally in the UK? Like, have audition procedures changed? Like, just how is just the whole orchestra culture changed? That's kind of a gigantic question.
Auditions to directly answer part of your question, Jason, is they are starting to change. There were sort of little sojourns into screened auditions way back. I think I remember the BBC Symphony doing some screened auditions way back in late 80s, and it didn't really catch on. We've got a different system from Europe and from America in that we have this audition, then they get this terrible word called a trial, which is like you go in and work with the orchestra, and then there's also, you might have 4, 5, up to 10 people having different trials. So logistics, it's very complicated, and you have to do various sets of work. Where I know in Europe and mostly in America, you do the audition, you get a lot number, and then you play behind a screen. So things are slowly moving towards a system that's more like that because of, equality. We need to be making sure that, the best person gets the job for all the right reasons. And it's a sort of like, I'm surprised it's taken so long. But in my time, I mean, my first audition and was I was very, very young and very green. I turned up and did the audition and smiled and said goodbye. And it was in Glasgow at Scottish Opera. And they were all very nice. And I thought it went well, but I had no really previous experience of doing any auditions. I think I'd done one audition before. And I got to the train station in Glasgow Central, and I just missed my train by a couple of minutes. I was, got to wait around for a couple of hours. So I was actually sitting having a post-audition burger, and this tannoy message came on, can Tony Alcock please come to the station manager's office? So I went there and they said, can you phone Scottish Opera? And I phoned them and they said, oh, can you come back and speak to us? I said, well, okay. So I went back there and they said, what are you doing tonight? And I said, well, I'm just traveling. I've got another audition in Wales tomorrow. Well, why don't you come and play Carmen? I said, okay, we'll find somebody who can lend you a suit. So I played, and, there was it went well, and I ended up going there. So, that trial system was like, I did a short trial, and then, mostly it's been sort of long trials. And there's so much hearsay in music. Sometimes somebody can come up to you and say, oh, I hear you're getting such and such job, and go, well, that's news to me. And I think very much in the old days, it used to be about who you knew, and it was maybe, all that sort of stuff was really, you were asked for references and you had to get really strong references. But I think more and more nowadays, it's moving towards a more European system of fairness and equality. What was the other part of the question, Jason?
No, that's what I was saying. It's just interesting to me how different systems exist in different parts of the world. And though I think the United States and Europe are similar, certainly what they ask for in auditions and some of the structures a bit different. But, here, like I was talking about Dave Crubble, that horn player, it was, the not even a trial. You're somebody's students come here, show up, and then, but you can be instantly fired, for anything. I was talking to Lawrence Hurst, who taught at Indiana University for decades. And he was working before blind auditions took place in the US and after, and teaching. And he said the whole way that classical double bass professors taught totally changed when the screen came into play, because all of a sudden it wasn't about who you know. And, I think the line that I hear about the audition system we have here is it's a horrible system except for all the others, kind of like what they say about democracy. But it's because, you go here and you got 200 bass players, or if it's screened, you might still have 75, and you don't know who you're hiring until the screen comes down in the final round for probably most orchestras in the States now. But it just was interesting to me about how more oriented towards excerpts everything became here because rather than let's train you to be the best possible musician you can be, and then here's some excerpts, we'll work on those a couple months before the auditions. And every school is a little bit different now, but I do think that here in the States, at least, everything is so geared around excerpts, like from the outset. And I think that is a pretty direct result of putting up those screens.
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to your value sets, doesn't it? And what you put the emphasis on. And I suppose, fairness being at the top of it nowadays, and equality and diversity and everything, it's really important that, and it does influence the way people teach. I suppose that what I feel about sort of maybe the British system is that one of the high values is that we sort of have in, certainly my orchestra, is whether somebody's sound fits in, how their radar is. And also it is about personality, because, we've maybe all experienced relationships. Well, I know we have, not only at work, where things are a little bit, you have a different value set, and that is quite tiring, isn't it? If you're with a desk partner and you clearly don't like each other, you can work at it, and it may be misunderstanding, whatever, but it does strain. So that's one of the value sets that is important to many British orchestras. And of course, I know in America you have this probationary period, so you have to be a good guy for at least, is it 2 years, or good person for 2 years?
Yeah, it depends. yeah. Typically, I think 2 years, 1 to 2 years. 2 years, I think, is pretty standard.
But it's also interesting the type of player and approach it produces. This, sort of, how would you play? Playing with freedom, I think, is one thing. And when I was at the BBC orchestras, you at first you're aware that there was this microphone right in front of you all the time. So it was quite good for moderating what you would say under your breath to the conductor. But also, you have a responsibility to like produce the goods at, the highest level all the time. But within that, human nature, a little bit of caution comes in, So it's just how you approach the screen. And I think you've got to, even though everything has got to be, if you like, perfect for an audition, I think, panels are discerning enough because of their skills of listening to discern, like even the breathing, and you can tell if somebody's agitated. So it's still, whilst it's very important to play all the right notes in the right order, I think what still comes across is maybe somebody's love for the music, their nurture, it's an all-round thing. But I love the fact that there's an emphasis on excerpts, because again, in British auditions, it was that thing, you play your party pieces. It's moved from, in the old days, it used to be like a big excerpt book, and they could literally throw anything at you, and you had to be able to, sometimes you would never have played it, if you were just starting out. And so, okay, doesn't know that one. I mean, I did an audition for Covent Garden when I was very young, and I had no idea about some of the excerpts, like the speeds. I mean, I could play the notes, and I think that's one of the things about experience, isn't it? The context you played it, how it's supposed to sound, where it fits in, who you're playing with. But when you're young, you might have ridiculous chops. That's one of your strengths. So your strengths develop over time, don't they? But I think it's really important that, in teaching excerpts, rather, that, we teach the context of them, and it's like a 360-degree thing. It's not just about delivering those 16 bars, with perfection and beauty. I've talked to a Chinese violinist, like internationally, he's won competitions, and he says when he plays in America and Europe, he feels a sense of like relief and freedom that he doesn't feel when he performs in China, because in China, he says every note must be perfect. And so that comes with a sort of jacket that you wear. Yeah. I mean, he's still going to be the same great musician, but his experience of it is so much more when he's able to fully express himself without this, you have to train yourself out of this, attachment to perfectionism, I think. Excellence, yes, but perfectionism, as someone once said, perfectionism is fear dressed up in high heels, So.
I like that line. That's a good line. Well, that's something I think people who are younger, maybe haven't played professionally, it's the audition environment is just, it's so sterile feeling, at least if we're talking about this screen thing, you walk out, it's so the opposite of being a musician, I'm playing to a wall, walking on carpet. But I think what people don't realize is that everybody behind that screen, they want you to succeed. They want to hear great music. No one goes in that day thinking, boy, I want to hear a bunch of nervous, I've been on, I'm sure far more limited number of committees than you, but I've been in a couple orchestras over the years, and I would get nervous when I would hear somebody being nervous up there. You can hear, you can just sense the nerves and the fast vibrato or the rushing or something like that. It's like, you just don't realize you're sitting there behind the screen. Everybody wants to hear great music and hear something beautiful. And I think that's something that comes with experience. And certainly once you get into the orchestra or sit on a committee, but and you're as a student, you're obsessed with perfection. You're sitting in this little practice room, polishing things over and over. No, yes, I got it. And so I think you're kind of like a house of cards. cards early on. Even if you have the chops, you haven't lived enough. You might think you have, but if you're playing a bunch of random excerpts and you've maybe performed a couple of the pieces maybe in your life, with your college orchestra, it's just totally different than sitting in a professional orchestra playing Mahler 5 multiple times, playing Beethoven 5 under great conductors. I mean, that's all stuff that's I don't know how you could teach that,
Yeah. Well, I think mentoring is a really important part of that, and mindset, and also like visioning, sort of like, I'm not just playing to a screen or to an invisible audience. Actually, this is about me playing the music in this moment. And I think you can develop that. And one of the interesting things about the pandemic with students and everybody learning over Zoom, including teachers panicking with the tech and trying to share their screen, et cetera, it is how people have developed that relationship with performance, sort of, well, and some people have said to me, well, I don't even like having that microphone there. I said, well, what's the story? What's the story you're telling yourself? It's really good to hear them say that, oh, well, I think, it's got to be perfect and that. Well, I said, well, how about just playing it without that attachment, seeing what it really sounds like, and like almost using every, if you like, listening back and using every wrong note as a platform for learning, because, I'm the result of like 10,000 failures, and I mean, that's the thing. It's just like, do you learn from your failures? Do you learn from the bad auditions, or do you let it eat you up? And I've been very, very successful. I've had a great career, but I've also flunked, really badly on a few occasions, and identifying, how you could do things differently is a key part of, like lifelong learning. I still haven't got it right, believe it or not.
Yeah. And that's good for people to hear too, because they can look, if you just look at your bio or what you've done, you'd be like, wow, it's like the all-star team of bassists or musicians, classical musicians. But people have, we're succeeding and failing every day up there on the concert hall, and I remember talking to Joe Conyers, who's the assistant principal bassist in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Yeah. And Joe,
he's got some great videos.
He's just what a wonderful person. Joe was telling me for his Philadelphia Orchestra audition, his successful one, he was almost laughing behind the screen. He just decided to like cut all the chords and just have a good time and let it rip and really go for it, and just like not care is the wrong word, but he was like he just let loose a little bit, and he thought people would probably think that he was insane if they saw him, because he was like, who's laughing playing Beethoven 5 behind a screen? But he won the job.
I think that's a really insightful perspective, because it's about the story you're attached to. And I think certainly from my own learning, I was attached to trying to be like, this thing which is very natural going into an audition. I was attached to being better than everybody else so I'd get the job. But actually what you need to be attached to is like your love of music, your own strengths, your own value sets. How the other guys play is really none of your business. and how you play is down to the story that you listen to in that moment. And what I like about the story you told about Joe Conyers is that in that moment, he was attached to like joy and looseness and like going for it. And in those sort of mindsets, there's so much less room for the inner critic to go, oh yeah, you messed that up. You're not even in that thing. It's like you were mentioning about the conductor that makes everybody feel like, I can do anything. So it's that way of being. And you read some of the, I'm an avid follower of Tony Robbins, because it sort of helps my journey as a coach. And he talks about breaking your patterns, and also the ability for human beings to like switch their mindset. So to notice what's going on, switch your mindset. And of course you have to be flexible, because you might slip off the G string in Lieutenant Key J, but what you're going to do, you just have to get back on the horse, so sometimes that happens,
Yeah, Tony Robbins has some great insight that you could take away for auditions. That instant mindset shift is an interesting thing, and folks who don't follow, a lot. I'll paraphrase what I think the idea behind that with Tony is like you take, you know, people think it takes forever to make a change, but in reality, there's some changes that can really be made like on the spot if you just decide to change your thinking. And I think that I think Tony and certainly me doing some state change can help. I think Tony does an ice bath plunge or something every morning. For me, it's a little different, but I get up and just go for a run every morning, or I I have a couple things I do. I like eat the frog first thing in the morning and just try to like get my mindset right.
Is that a euphemism for green slimy liquid with frog spawn in it? And is it like a fresh juice or something? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, that's a euphemism we have here in the States, at least. Eat the frog. Like,
eat the frog.
Do the thing you don't want. Do the thing you don't want to do.
Oh,
okay. Of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And I think the other thing is like actually turning up. You know, that's the first thing, isn't it? No, turning up when you don't want to. And a lot of students say to me, you know, well, you know, I haven't got any motivation. There's nothing to practice for anymore. And you go, oh, well, that's an interesting perception. So what would it be like if, you know, the Berlin Phil phoned next week and said, actually, we'd like to come and do an audition, you know, what would it be like then? Oh, well, yeah, that would be different, you know. So, I mean, that's, again, the power of visioning and being as if, you know, and certainly none of us know what's around the corner. So that's the great thing, is that, like, opportunities, you know, you can never be completely ready, but something will turn up and something will, you know, out of your own design if you choose to go that direction.
Yeah, it's amazing how luck seems to, we call it luck or opportunity or whatever, but it's amazing how that seems to appear for people who just show up consistently. And, you know, one of my favorite writers, Seth Godin, writes about a lot of topics, marketing and such, but he talks a lot about working like a professional. What distinguishes an amateur from a professional? A professional shows up at 10 a.m. every day or 8 a.m. or whatever, whether they want to or not, right? Like you don't necessarily want to be at rehearsal 10 a.m. every day, but you're a professional. If you were an amateur about it, you'd get fired because you'd show up whenever you wanted to. I think it's good to have hobbies and things you are an amateur in. Like I have a lot of things in my life that I think of it as a hobby or an amateur. I only do it if I want to. So I'll be I'll pull out some of my electronic music gear and make it, but I don't tell myself, okay, Jason, 5 p.m. every day, you're breaking that out. I'll do it for a couple weeks. I'll put it away for 6 months. I think that's great. But for the stuff, my work, whatever the stuff is that I choose to call work, you know, I show up, I sit in this chair or I go to that thing. And I think that, that's a line that can get a little irritating as a teacher, though I have no motivation, but it's tough. It's a lesson also just to like, you know, what is a professional? And, you know, if you do show up, maybe you don't feel on Wednesday like you want to work hard, but if you just put in some time, that consistency over time, it's amazing how the opportunities tend to go to those who work consistently like that. Yeah,
I mean, in coaching, we get taught and we teach, you know, don't coach the saboteur or the critic, you know, the one that says, well, I'm really not very happy, and you know, and you say, well, what would it be like if you were happy? You know, what would your attitude to be if like this was the last chance you ever got to play the double bass, you know, or you throw out a question that gets them into a different mindset. So that, I mean, that's really, really important for all of us, isn't it? But yeah, it is that thing that, you know, success is about, and I still believe this to be true, mostly about, it is about perspiration and 10% inspiration. But within that 90%, how you are, how engaged you are, it's not just about, you know, digging for that 90%. It's about being, you know, what am I focused on? What is the point of what I'm doing? You know, what am I doing this for? Why am I sitting behind this double bass? What bit of it is actually fun for me? You know, something go ahead, please. I remember once when I was in the Halle and Kent Nagano was the conductor, and many people found him quite scary, and he's a very, very good musician. And I remember him came up to me once and he said, I was playing principal at the time. I was co-principal there, but Diana was on maternity leave. And he came up to me and he said, do you like music like this? It was like, well, it's one thing when the music director comes up to you and then he asks you a question like that with all the implications of, I was thinking, well, was I scowling? You know, I have this tendency when I'm being serious to like scowl, you know, and there was this thing in the profession then that if you were smiling, if it was a neurotic conductor, which I'm not saying he wasn't at all, but other conductors have gone really hard on people that have been smiling in their rehearsals, thinking they're taking the mick or not, taking things seriously. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of daunted by this, but it did make me think, it's not just about what we think of the conductor. We have a responsibility to sort of help the conductor as much as we can. And, I think it was a Fritz Reiner story I heard, but again, it's one of these apocryphal stories that could have been anybody about, him saying to the principal double bass, can you follow the beat? It's not quite with me or something. And the bass player, said he couldn't see and everything. And the next day turned up with a telescope and was looking through the telescope at the beat. And then I think it was, I don't know, the story I heard was, which was bound to be true, was then Reiner wrote something on a small piece of paper and held it up to the telescope, and it was, "You are fired."
Yep, I think I've heard that story too. I hope that's true, because that is a
well why let
a good move?
Why let the truth get in the way of a good story? That's what I say.
Right. Yeah, that Reiner, it's so interesting. Where I went to school in Chicago, and Fritz Reiner donated, or the Reiner estate donated all his old scores and all of his music collection to Northwestern University. And it was really interesting going to college and looking, and you'd have like Beethoven 5 and Reiner's writings and those crazy batons that he used and all sorts of stuff. So it's just, it made so I have this not soft place in my heart for Reiner, but I thought about Reiner a lot over the years.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Something I do, and I sometimes I fall out of the habit, but something that really helps me is doing a little bit of gratitude journaling at the beginning of the day, which is real simple for me. I just write down a few things, few people that made my life better, a few things I'm happy for. And that can be so good because I can, I get so focused on what I'm working on, and I realize, that sort of sets me right for the day, generally, in terms of mindset. And I just realize, the world's a beautiful place, or it can be a beautiful place, or I'm choosing to experience it in a beautiful way. And if I don't do that, I sometimes have great days, but I tend to have a little bit more even days when I do that, and just feel like I'm approaching things with a little bit more of an open heart.
Oh, absolutely. I love that, Jason. That's beautiful. And it's sort of, it's that world, isn't it, of acceptance, but also gratitude as well. And aren't we lucky to be able to play music? I mean, I think that's one of the things that has been one of the things about the pandemic is people noticing what's really important to them, the value of music. I mean, you hear so many stories, it was really music that kept me going through, whatever your music is, and we had people on the streets, lots of musicians, we played on the streets, and, people would, clap the NHS and then be a musical sort of item. And, so people realize the value of music in their lives, and what a great way to earn a living, I mean, so, I mean, and I feel really, obviously my heart goes out to musicians that have not been able to earn a living, the freelance community and those who've, been driving trucks and everything. But I do believe musicians are amongst the most creative and resourceful people, and resilient as well. And I think, if the world returns to some sort of normality, then I think that creative drive will surface again. I think we need music even more.
Here's Mark Gelfel from Modacity on the concept of 4 triggers of flow.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi identified these 4 triggers of flow. They are complete concentration in the present moment, immediate feedback, clear goals, and the challenge skills ratio. What that means in your practicing is that you should perform something, record yourself, be completely concentrated performing it in the present moment, so you don't need to analyze it, then listen back. When you listen back, you'll get immediate feedback, at which point you can set a clear goal, and that clear goal should be set such that it's challenging enough that your current skills will allow you to reach it. At that point, you perform with that challenge in mind, complete concentration in the present moment. You listen back, you get immediate feedback, and you set another clear goal. So that cycle of concentration, feedback, clear goals, and making sure the challenge skills ratio is intact for your practice is the recipe for staying in flow and really making a lot of progress.
You can learn more about my favorite practice app and get a special deal on lifetime membership by visiting modacity.co/CBC. And thank you, Modacity, for sponsoring the podcast. People have been saying such great things about my course with Discover Double Bass Beginners Classical Bass. Here is Nicholas Walker, professor of double bass at Ithaca College and past president of the International Society of Bassists. Nicholas writes, Jason draws from this vast network with his contagious enthusiasm and love of learning. Presented through the beautifully organized and easily accessible framework of Discover Double Bass, this is a terrific learning experience for any beginner, as well as a great model for any new teacher. I am blushing, Nicholas. Thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled with how this course came out. Jeff Chalmers and the whole team at Discover Double Bass are so professional. It was such a great experience, and it was the best representation of what I would love to take every single beginner through in terms of format and presentation. And I'm just so happy that it's out there. You can learn more. We've got a link in the show notes, or you can just visit discoverdouble.com/Jason Heath. Well, I can see it on the streets here in San Francisco, Tony. I tell you, because we have this relatively nice climate all the time, we've been able to do things outside, and things got shut down totally. They've been real hardcore here in California, and then they opened up and they shut down, and now we're open again, not really open, but so I'm sure everybody remembers their last concert before the pandemic. I had this weird concert where they didn't let the audience go, but they let us play, and then my bass has been sitting in the corner ever since, and there was no music in the town, except of course it's San Francisco, so there was one guy walking around my neighborhood playing What a Wonderful World on the accordion. That's the only music, which is very San Francisco. But then finally they started some small ensembles, no orchestras, but jazz combos, bands, funk bands and stuff started to play outside, and you could just see the energy in people, that people were so happy to see music. And I was like, oh my God, I will never take any musical experience for granted ever again, and then they shut it down again, and you're like, oh, it felt even worse almost, because we had, even though it was almost no music, we had something. And now we're back, and my wife and I go to the park every weekend, and they have what's called the Bay Area Jazzmobile. It's this giant van that sets up, and all these musicians come out, and all the people at cafes are watching, and then you go down this other street, and they're all bands set up in the pubs, and then the audience is outside. And so some of my freelance friends are actually starting to get some work again. So things are feeling a lot more positive. But boy, I will be the most frequent concert goer you have ever seen when we can get back to concerts. I mean, we would go. My wife and I go see the Symphony and go to SF Jazz and see. But I think a lot of people are probably gonna. I'm sure I'm not the only one in that camp. So if we can just muscle through this, a roaring 20s for music is likely. And
just sort of testimony to the versatility of musicians is that how quickly we've all adapted to social distance concerts, where everybody sits on a stand. I don't know how it is in the States, but you turn your own music, and, you're miles from anybody, but just this sense of wanting to do it. CBSO did their centenary concert in September, and Sir Simon Rattle came and conducted, and, it was just, even though it was in a warehouse that used to make cars, this big space because of fresh air and television things and everything, it was amazing how quickly musicians were able to just do what was necessary, and all of a sudden your radar was so much further apart, but, so much to celebrate. And I think we're really, really lucky that, we deal in the currency that is oral emotions and palpable, when you're a bass player, you know what it feels like to feel music through your body. I once took part in a project at the Halle, and it was authors of a book called Notes from the Green Room, and they were doing some research, and they had this chair developed that, would shake in resonance with the music. And it was like that whole body experience. And then you had to sort of suggest what the music meant to you and everything. And I came up with some very emotional stories, which was really interesting. But the whole thing about it is I do this every day with my bass, the bass vibrates through me, and that's the thing, so it's more about, this is going to sound very esoteric and a bit off the wall, but if I'm not vibrating properly as a musician, that it's not going to go through. It's actually me that makes the noise, or us that make the noise. So the physicality and the energy and everything, and you can tell when you're blocked, the sound and the intonation, everything. And it's like that thing when things are on song, it comes out through the instrument. So I think it's a great barometer for life, really, you know, whether you're resonating with what, you know, if you're in it for the right reasons, I think it comes out in your music.
Wow, I believe I saw that concert. I believe it's on YouTube or somewhere. The
That's
one
right.
at the
Yeah.
warehouse, right?
Yeah.
I was yeah. How cool! Wow, that's great. I watched that popped up on my radar a few months ago. I believe it was a few months ago. And it was inspiring to me, even without knowing, like, you know, the whole, you know, just kind of watching that video without a lot of context. But it was really cool. Well, it's great. It's got to be a great feeling, even though it's got to be weird to spaced out like that. It's got to be a great feeling to be making music with other humans. I mean, I remember so clearly. It was March. What, 10th or something like that was the last time I played bass and it was just a bass quartet. But, like, you know, that bass has sat in that corner, you know, for a year and change now, and I look forward to it. I sort of living vicariously through people who are actually getting out and playing, and gigs are starting to reappear here in California. I turned down my first gig.
Wow, fantastic!
So we'll hopefully get back at it somehow. So but I'm looking forward to it, for sure.
Yeah, one of the rare musicians who was double booked this year.
Welcome to my weird career. Yeah, speaking to the resilience, it has been interesting. I overuse this line, but I've been inadvertently preparing for a pandemic for years, because I do all these things in the industry, and I have all this other stuff like the podcast and such that I do. But it's been really interesting to watch people who have, you know, you rise to the top of the profession that you're in. And for many people, you get so focused on performing at this high level. So you're not building your online course or your social media following or creating all these other revenue streams, because you're just focused on doing this one thing. And so it's been really interesting. But the people that make it to a position like you're in, I think of them as Olympic athletes in a sense, you know, not exactly, but like the level at which you have to perform to get through that gauntlet is just really high. And so it's been interesting, just from an outsider perspective, to see all these high performing people and see what they've been doing with their time in the pandemic. And, you know, here in the States, it's been rough, you know, like the Metropolitan Opera, they're just like laid off for who knows how long. But it's been interesting to see all these Olympians, in a sense, kind of try different projects out. So I've been kind of inspired by seeing people, you know, to greater or lesser degrees of success, but to see all these people that were probably, they would have just been practicing like crazy, realizing, oh no, the rug can get completely pulled out from under me. Maybe I should have something on the side. And so it's been an interesting year, just seeing that creativity and resilience that musicians have.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest gifts that we can have when we get to a certain age is like time. I mean, that is the one thing we don't know how long we got and everything like that. And of course, the economics come into it. And it's just this sense that for many, many years, the musicians have been just so busy, and, you know, let you try and focus on quality, but you may be teaching, you've got those responsibilities, you've got family, you've got your job, and, you know, trying to keep things, you know, in top condition. But actually the gift of time has been really interesting, as you said. Personally, for me, I've been really interested in sort of deepening my work around coaching, and, you know, I managed to attend lots of night classes on it and do a course that would have taken me much longer to do under normal circumstances. And, you know, I'm in a fortunate position. I realize that. I mean, you know, we've had support from the government, and I'm in a sort of full-time job. So although we've had less pay, there's been something. And yeah, I've heard from colleagues, you know, I've got a colleague who's in the Met Orchestra, and yeah, that seems one of the most bizarre situations in the world, you know. But anyway, I totally agree with you how people have found different things to focus on. And we had a bass class at RBC that ran through first pandemic, where we had international guests. You know, Tom Martin invites lots of people. So we had Tim Cobb, we had Lorraine Campay, we had Pino Ettore. Yeah, so we were just able, Kurt Marocchi came as well. And so we were just so fortunate, you know, and okay, it's with Zoom, but the kids got to play to these people. And of course, you know, the thing with Zoom is you have to assume with Zoom, but you can get the essence of what's going on. And of course, they can learn from the wisdom of the people in front of them. And it is, wow, I played to Tim Cobb today, or wow, I played to Lorraine Campé, or wow, I played to Tom Martin. It's like something, it's a motivational thing. And then, I suppose musicians appearing on the internet, on social media, that's been a great thing. But just sort of talking and feeding into your sort of story, if you like. I think it's like that awareness about business skills as well. That for me is a sort of slow burn journey. So certainly with my coaching business, and I'm a good coach. I make a difference to people's lives. I've been well trained. A bit like on the bass. I know that I can do it, but it's that other side of things about how do I let people know I can do it? What's important about a business. So that's been interesting for me, and also challenging, really challenging to sort of. I've trained, I've put all this money in, so how do I make it work? And that's been really interesting.
Yeah, well, and definitely send me a link if you're taking new folks, and I'll
include that
with the podcast. One of the great things about, I think that people who get to a level of a position like what you have, I think there's so much that people, whether in music or out, can learn from you just because of that the high level of long-term dedication to something, like achieving a very long-term goal, like success in a professional audition situation. There are so many skills that translate from that. Christopher Still is one of the trumpet players in the Los Angeles Philharmonic here, and he started a coaching business called Honesty Pill, and it's been really interesting talking to him and getting to know him. Yeah, it's a good name, and just about, because he has so much to offer, and you have so much to offer, and so I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think that's there, and I think that's part of the reason why people that really invest in music, whenever they turn their sights on something else, they tend to do pretty well at it. That's kind of my unscientific thing. Like, my wife is a radiology faculty at the university here. Wow. She was a professional harpist. She has a couple degrees in harp, but then went back to school, and her medical school accepted, essay that got her into a lot of the best medical schools was about driving. She got called to sub in the lyric opera on harp for with a couple hours notice. Now, she'd played the opera before, but it was a snowstorm. She's driving down to the hall. It's not her harp. It's with a conductor she hasn't worked with. It's on a harp she hasn't played. Who knows what tempo this, and that essay, so that's an experience that your typical biology major probably didn't have. So and I could think of a lot of other examples besides my wife, but I think that people that really invest in music, you just develop these skills that transfer so well over into other areas in the world.
Absolutely, Jason. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, musical life is like a metaphor for life itself, isn't it? It's that it's not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. I mean, like lifelong learning, you never know it all. There's, if you like, the ability of the human being and the human brain to soak up experiences and, share those, it is millions of neural pathways that we never even use that are still available to us. Yeah. And I think it's really important to sort of keep what you love at the, what are you great at doing? What do you love doing? And that, what I loved about your sort of hobby story is that thing, I'm doing something, and I don't need to be attached to being fantastic at it, But I think careers as long as mine, as you would say, it has felt, if you look at the biog, and my own coach said this to me, he said, wow, that's amazing. You've so much to celebrate. But actually, before I became more aware of just that whole subject, there is this thing that goes around the music world, like imposter syndrome, I'll be found out, or, maybe I was just lucky, or there'll always be people better than me. And, if you allow yourself to listen to those voices and don't go unchallenged, then you can fall into a very defensive place. And peaks and troughs of a career, you do go through times that are really challenging. You know, sometimes you put the bow on the string and you say, well, you know, that doesn't seem to work at all. Or my favorite one is rosin neurosis. That's one of my favorites, you know. But the funny thing is, whenever I'm more relaxed, the rosin seems to work, you know. So, you know, I've been through all the rosins, all the strings as well, different types of hair. But it's just, you know, you can laugh about it now because it's all part of play and recreation, you know. Well, but I think, what you said there, Jason, is absolutely on the money, and that, you know, musicians are great at being, you know, creative and naturally resourceful. And, you know, when you're together with your instrument, it's sort of like, and other musicians, it's sort of like you feel a sort of completeness. And I think that's been the challenge for many people, you know, especially musicians and actors and other performers, is like, it takes away the context of your life. So in some respects, but we're not just our relationship with the double bass, you know, we're brilliant humans at other things, you know, even if it is, you know, really playing chess very badly against my sons, you know, that's also a skill, isn't it? You know, sort of.
Wow. Tony, you're incredible. We got to do a round two sometime.
Okay.
Whether it's in Birmingham when I'm in the UK, whenever that is, or if the next time you're in San Francisco, let me take you around. We can break up the microphones. I live essentially in Little Italy here, and so we got great.
Wow.
I love taking musicians around the neighborhood, and we got all these great, all the beatnik cafes, Jack Kerouac, you know, where he used to hang out and stuff. That's all right here. So I look forward to continuing the chat in person, hopefully soon.
Yeah, and I love that place where they turn the tram round. Do they still do it where everybody gets off and the guys have to push it around the turntable? That's just so fantastic.
Yeah, there's one. I on my daily run, I go back right by one of those. I got one in the south end, one at the north end. Yeah, there's a lot of charm to this place. It's definitely a special place. And so, but I would love to. I have people on the podcast. I've had people on 6, 7, 8 times. So let's definitely do a.
Oh, that would be cool.
Two.
Yeah. I'd love that.
In person, would be even better. But I'm sure our paths will cross
absolutely
soon. Whether it's you touring with the orchestra or me coming to, I'm long overdue for a fuller visit to the UK than just going to Leeds and.
Oh, well, you'd be very welcome. And when you come to Birmingham, you know, we've got more canals than Venice. Did you know that?
Wow, I had no idea.
It was the industrial heartland, and also this is an interesting fact. Not many people know it was the centre of the European pen making industry. Actually, the world pen making industry. You know, the old nibs. You know, pen and silver nibs and everything. Until a gentleman called Mr. Biro, who was Hungarian, he invented the ballpoint pen, and that put paid to Birmingham's biggest industry at the time. And we've got the best concert hall in the United Kingdom by far. I mean, I can honestly say that.
I've been a fan of your orchestra for forever. I mean, that's one of the orchestras. That's like one of the ones that I would reference all the time when we're finding recordings for my students. And so it's like I would absolutely love to see a concert there.
You'd be very welcome. List. Yeah. Well, it's great chatting to you. I mean, we could chat for hours.
Tony, pleasure chatting with you. We got to do a round two in person, preferably, but over Zoom is always great too as well. And folks, check out that coaching site to learn more about what Tony does. That's lifecoach-tonyalcock.com, and that is also linked up to in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. It's fun to connect with two people that are in the same orchestra, and then Stephen Street has an association as well. Very cool. Makes the world seem very small for sure. Sure. Jason can't talk here. But I'm not going to edit these outros. And thank you for listening wherever you come from. If you are from the UK and this is your first podcast, welcome. You got 800 plus that you can check out in the archives, either at our website, contrabassconversations.com, or we have an app too, contrabassconversations.com/app, or just search for us on your app store of choice. And that's a good way to access the podcast, favorite things, download things for offline listening. Yeah, you can do that in any other podcast app, but you got this one. It's free, and it puts a nice little CBC logo, not the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the Contrabass Conversations app on your phone. And if you got a guest suggestion, reach out. feedback@contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch with me. I love hearing from folks, and I hear from folks all over the world. It's one of the unique pleasures of doing a show like this and doing it for 14 years plus, counting however long I've done this at this point. It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much also to the team that puts these together. Thank you to Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchey, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you can learn more about everything he does in his award-winning basses at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.